starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Let's Get Ready to MOOC. I'm Pamela Blue. Today's webinar, the first of 4 on the broad topic
Muted.
libraries and online learning, is designed to set the stage and expand on a discussion that began at the 2013 ALCTS Midwinter Symposium in Seattle. We are delighted that Mike Eisenberg is presenting the introductory webinar. As he did last January when he kicked off the symposium, Mike will provide background information on online learning and how instruction and learning are being revolutionized by the MOOC movement. As the founding dean of the University of Washington Information School, Mike believes in an innovative and entrepreneurial approach to the education of librarians and information professionals. The focus of his current research is on information and technology literacy, and he is co-author of the widely used and well-regarded information literacy program, The Big Six Approach to Information Problem Solving. Today's presentation will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you shortly after the conclusion of the program. Please type your questions into the question box on your screen. Mike will pause a couple of times during his presentation to answer questions, and if we run out of time, Mike will respond to any remaining questions offline and the answers will be emailed to you. And now there may be a short delay as I turn the podium over to Mike.
Hi everybody, we're getting things going. I'm going to show you my screen. You should see the clean screen and the view. It's really good to be with everyone on this webinar. I understand we have people from all over the place, and that's great. I have been working in online environments for many years, well over 25 years, and I've used all different kind of formats from satellite to today's even mobile technology. I'm also somebody in virtual worlds. In the upper right-hand corner, you see my Second Life avatar as well. But this is kind of how I look these days in my real-life class. In the lower left, that's my undergraduate students, and this is a real picture of the music library at the University of Washington where I was surfing the stacks. So let's get moving on to the webinar. Here's what I'm going to cover today. I am going to give background, as Pamela said. When we did the session here in Seattle, I gave the overview of online basics. I'll talk about approaches and strategies and roles. And then I'm going to focus a little on MOOCs, although the main focus on MOOCs will be in some of the other later webinars. And then I have some things that I've learned. I have 7 assertions, 7 things about online learning and the role of libraries and librarians that I would like to talk about. And then lastly, I will talk about some implications. I will pause briefly after each of these agenda items to see if there are questions. You can type your questions right in the question box. I hope you see that, and you can type them in there, and then when I ask for questions, our organizers and facilitators will help me with that. So let's get on to the main webinar. I'd like to start a presentation like this with a disclaimer that I borrowed from H.L. Mencken, and this is a kind of a paraphrase that for every realistic complicated problem, there'll be a simple, understandable, inexpensive solution that will be wrong. Beware of anybody promising simple solutions to complex problems. It's a very complex world, and today in the education arena, K through 20, and even lifelong learning, it's even more complex than before, and there are not simple solutions, but there are solutions, and there are ways for us to get involved. And by us, I mean libraries and librarians. And teaching here at the Information School, I think we're entering a golden age, and online learning is part of the reason why it is a golden age. Let me move on just to give some background. I'll take about 5 or 7 minutes or so and talk about some of the basics of online learning. And I'm going to do that in 4 different areas. I'll talk about synchronous versus asynchronous learning. I will talk a little about the learning management systems that are prevalent and used today. I then want to talk a little about the tools within online learning environments that we use, some of the strategies and the tactics that instructors and students and librarians and IT specialists use, and then that bleeds into the roles of the various players. And then we'll come back and focus specifically on the roles and the opportunities for libraries and librarians. So when we think about online learning, we have to determine whether we're talking about real-time live events like this, which is a synchronous event, or an asynchronous, which is much more self-paced and where the learning takes place in the interaction with materials and resources and questions and things like that. It's kind of like the difference between this. You got your synchronized swimming, and you've got people just kind of swimming on their own and doing things. This chart I found, and I thought that was valuable to talk about. If you look here, let me get my highlighter for a minute. Here we go. If we look here in terms of the synchronous, which is live, real time, and it's a non-interactive environment, we see lectures and we see presentations and things like that, and that's where we find a lot of our MOOCs these days. The MOOCs are synchronous but kind of non-interactive at this point. Now we can add interactivity to this with conferencing that's two-way, with messaging, Twitter, with ways of engaging and bringing people in, and that works when you have reasonable numbers. Today we expect to have upwards of 100 people sitting in one form or another. Well, it's really not practical to do a lot of interactivity, but as you notice that we'll be doing, and as we've said, that we will be allowing you to ask questions through the chat, and that is more of this quadrant. Now, when we switch to asynchronous, we have all kinds of ways for communicating and delivering asynchronous learning. But to make it interactive, we want to add in things like the social networking and blogging and discussion board and wikis and Facebook and things like that. And in fact, I have in my online classes, I did at one point use Facebook as the interactive system, and it worked out pretty well. And I can share more of that, although they've changed some of the functions and made it not as easy to use as Facebook used to. Thinking about the learning management systems these days, I think most of you are probably familiar with the two biggies, with Blackboard and with Moodle. Blackboard being the overwhelming leader in the marketplace and used by many colleges and universities and some K-12 as well. And then Moodle, which is an open source and freely available, which is used also quite a bit. We see some of the other systems here as well. Sakai is a consortial effort that is sponsored, well, it's hosted at the University of Indiana, and that's a consortium of universities and colleges. And a relatively new player in the market is Canvas, and I happen to have a lot of experience now with Canvas, because that's what we're using now at the University of Washington. Please don't take this as an endorsement. I'm not endorsing any of these or not endorsing. It's just that Canvas is the system that we are using today. The difference, just to let you know, between a Blackboard-based system and, say, a Canvas system or Blackboard and Moodle is Blackboard and Moodle are web-based systems. They're available on the web, but they're really built on an HTML platform where they were organized and designed around databases and systems that work in a web-based format. Canvas is based on a wiki platform, which makes it much easier to make changes and to move things in and out and to engage students, but the wiki creates its own set of problems. So I'm not, again, endorsing one versus the other, but that's how Canvas is working these days. Let me erase the highlighter and then go to the next slide. Now, some of the tools that we can use within the learning management systems or within any kind of online learning environment, we have things like email. We either can use email within a system or separately. There are mailing lists, meaning that we have an asynchronous type of communication, threaded conferencing, online discussion boards, wikis for collaborative work, and one could consider Google Docs and things like that as wiki-like. There's blogs, and of course there's all of the social media capabilities, as well as online polling and other tools. Poll Everywhere is an example of an online polling system that you can use, again, within the online learning environment to make it more interactive. And I think that's kind of what we want to move towards, if at all possible, and that is more interactive systems. Now, some of the strategies that I have used and others have used in online learning in terms of synchronous communication is the synchronous, you want engaging presenters. Your presenters have to use a variety of models. They can't read things. They have to realize that people are reading on the screen much quicker than you can say things. So it's very important that your presenters are engaging and keep things moving. You want a variety of multimedia formats. So we're using mostly PowerPoint here, but you'll see in a slide or two I'm going to go out into a website and show that as well. I think that in a synchronous environment, it's really important to think about the time frame. I think it works for up to an hour, 90 minutes in a live webinar type synchronous situation, but you get beyond that and it really gets difficult and tedious. I usually aim, as we are today, we've set aside a 1-hour time block, and I plan to talk for about 40 minutes and leave about 20 minutes for interactivity and questions, and I think that's the kind of thing that you want to do. You also want to break up your aspects, break up your content into different parts or module. When we do stream things and we do show it, we want to do it in high quality, and that's one of the reasons that we're not doing video here. I could turn on my video. You could see me sitting here in my office. However, that increases the bandwidth and makes it more choppy. There can be some difficulties or can make it more difficult. And also this back channel, which I use a lot both in my online classes and in my face-to-face classes, and that is just like the chat room that we have open here and the questions. It's okay for you to talk to each other through the chat or the question boxes. And in my online teaching, I often encourage that, and I'll even have a co-teacher or a teaching assistant or a volunteer help to moderate what we call the back channel. If there are questions about back channel, I can answer that a little later. In terms of asynchronous, it really requires extensive planning and preparation. Where a face-to-face class, you might say that You know, for every hour of face-to-face, there's 2 hours of preparation. I would double that for an asynchronous type environment. It's going to require, say, 4 hours of preparation for 1 hour of activities that the students will be engaged in. Asynchronous needs to be integrated either via a website or a learning management system. Very much recommend multimodal delivery and participation. In other words, use a variety of different formats. Again, the high quality, and don't underestimate the importance of checking the recording. Make sure the microphones aren't buzzing or there's no feedback or things like that. And really, the selection of instructional resources, and I hope librarians are picking up on this right away, carefully selected instructional resources. Now, we're not talking just about outside readings and things like that. We're talking about the very resources that me as an instructor that I will be using in my class. I have to very carefully select those and carefully sequence those. And I can really use help, and a lot of faculty can really use help. And it's quite different than what we might consider for a face-to-face class. Threaded discussions are central in a asynchronous environment, and then I like to use subgroups with discussion leaders. That's my style of handling the discussion boards to get everybody involved. And then the faculty and the students all need lots of support, and by support it's sometimes just technical or logistical support, but it can be even more than that. The support can be for understanding assignments, understanding the sequence of material, understanding more in-depth learning activities. So again, foreshadowing that there's a tremendous role for library staff professionals to become involved at a much deeper level in supporting faculty and students. In terms of the roles of the various players, I do think that we think of the faculty and their role in an online environment is really moving to where education is going itself, and that is a little less of the top-down delivery method and a move toward what we call the guide on the side. Rather than, you know, the person in front of the class doing all of that, the faculty guiding the students, and particularly in the interactive environment. Now, the MOOCs are different. There's a role for faculty as, you know, very highly qualified presenter, lecturer as well. Maybe we see MOOCs as a resurrection of the lecture approach toward learning. I don't know. Students, as we said, their role potentially in online is much more where they are in control and are taking control of the learning. And particularly within a MOOC environment, the student must have self-control and motivation, and that's why you see a lot of the statistics about those that start MOOCs and don't finish. There's a high percentage of those, and I'll talk about that a little more in just a minute. But the role of the student kind of parallels that of the faculty. The student really is responsible for their learning, not the faculty necessarily, particularly in a MOOC type environment where, again, they're not the guide on the side, but they're what we call the sage on the stage. Okay? There's a tremendous role in online for IT staff, and one of my urgings is that IT and library, we kind of think of them together, and that the IT staff and the library staff maybe should be not just coordinating, but really working fully together. Maybe we should have a reorganization, I don't know, on some campuses. And then there's a tremendous need for instructional design. And I can talk about that maybe if there are questions later, but what I mean by instructional design is the instructional designers who are experts in using the tools and techniques in relation to pedagogy and learning. How do the tools help for learning? And that's what the designers need to be able to work with and work with faculty on. And in terms of libraries and librarians, well, I'm going to hold off on that, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. But I hope you're starting to think about, what are the roles of libraries and librarians in this new online learning type world that we're part of. So before I turn to the MOOCs, are there any questions that we have? I will pause and see if the moderators have picked up on any questions or anything that they would like me to respond to.
Mike, there aren't any written questions, but I do have a question. You mentioned Facebook as one of the tools that you use, and I'm just wondering if there are any privacy concerns with doing that.
Well, it would. It's a great question, and I'm always very conscious of privacy and privacy issues. It doesn't require when you're using Facebook for the students to befriend you. So their personal websites, their personal Facebook sites and their personal stuff is still private and personal. They can join the group and still maintain that privacy to a certain degree. But it does require that students have a Facebook account. And I've always had a few students who either don't or don't want to, and what I ask them to do is to create an account just for this particular purpose. And again, they don't have to put anything on that. It just allows them to participate. So it's there are ways to be conscious of that, and in particular, I do not encourage students to befriend me or want to befriend me or things so that I'm not involved with as intimately. One of the things I used to really like about Facebook was Facebook had two different capabilities. They had the posting, what they call the timeline and stuff now, and they also had a wall. And a wall I really liked because it was a quick and easy way for students to participate without having to go to a whole lot of thought and background. But then Facebook merged the two, which was one of the reasons I stopped using it.
The other question I have that's sort of related to social networking, you said that you encouraged students in your class to use the back channel. I just wondered, since you said you have somebody who sort of keeps an eye on what's going on, maybe this is not an issue, but don't you find that people are tuning out of the lecture and doing their own thing instead of paying attention?
Yeah. And so this is for online as well as face-to-face that I use this. And my answer is actually by using the back channel, it helps them to focus more on the lecture and what's going on in class. One of the biggest complaints in a face-to-face class these days when students bring laptops or devices is that they are Facebooking and emailing and web searching or browsing and doing other things. By having them participate in a back channel as well as to receive the main channel, which is my lectures or my online thing like we're doing now, it kind of keeps them occupied. So my feeling is they're multitasking anyway. I'd rather have them multitask about the class and encourage that. I will also tell you, and again, this is not about back channels, and I can talk about that if the audience is interested more, but what I find, it's incredibly valuable to help to focus students' attention. So my teaching assistant or even one of the volunteers will say, did you hear what he just said? That's a really important item. Or they use it for collective note-taking and those to identify the key aspects. I find it incredibly valuable when I have a guest speaker because I can be talking to the class, kind of giving them a commentary or a narrative while the guest speaker is speaking and really encouraging them actually to pay more attention. So I'd rather, if they're going to multitask, I'd rather have them do it with my stuff rather than their own.
Understood. Well, I think maybe we can return to your presentation now.
All right, let's get going. So let's now focus on the MOOC aspects. MOOCs stand for Massive Open Online Course, and I'm going to talk around these words a little more in just a minute, but just to show you, well, I didn't. Oh, here's the slide I want. MOOCs have been around for a while. They're and this slide I picked up last year in 2002. So you begin to see some of the major players and how things kind of develop. And it kind of took off with the MIT Open Course Project and Stanford, and we see what people are doing now. We have edX and all these things. And really what a MOOC is taking a you know, your best faculty, your best presenters, and they are offering their content and the opportunity for people to learn, often at no cost or low cost. And then there are all kinds of issues and questions which I will bring up in just a moment, but here they're talking about what are the revenue models, and what about course completion, and how do we determine whether they've learned things, which is the accreditation, and of course there's the student authentication itself, meaning how do we make sure that students are who they say they are and they're the ones doing the work. So there's a lot of pedagogical and institutional concerns there as well. This is a nice drawing from, you see the citation below, and it said it's okay, Creative Commons to use. So we see here, what do we mean by massive? Well, by massive we are talking about, you know, hundreds to thousands. Open means that, is it open registration and free, or is it the content that's open? And if it is a cost, is it affordable? So open means that you're not necessarily a matriculated student at a certain institution or whatever, but there are a number of things around it as well. The online has to do whether or not it's definitely offered online, like this webinar is, but so far this webinar has really pretty much been one way, and so there's not a whole lot of interactivity, although we did have a couple of questions there. And then the course itself, well, a course is an organized body of knowledge and skills that people can attain, or we want them to attain, and so it's more than just a single one-off lecture, or even this webinar, which is a one-off, but all that has to kind of be put together. We need to think about, are there credits? Again, this thing about badges, which is a new way of giving recognition. Are we creating learning communities? What are the roles of the instructors? Assessment turns out to be everything. And so for libraries, what I want to point out is that there are opportunities for us as libraries and librarians to get involved with each level of this, the massive, open, online, and the course level, and that is providing services, resources, expertise, guidance, planning in the MOOC environment. Now, there has been a backlash lately about MOOCs, and I put 3 of them here. The first one that I'm pointing out, let's see, I think I have the article itself I'm going to bring up. Can you just confirm that you're seeing the website for Inside Higher Education? Did somebody just make sure, let me know? Just say yes. Okay. So you see here where it talks about how less than 7% finish. I think that's really a little misleading. A lot of people start a MOOC just to see what it's like, knowing that they're not going to stick with it and whatever. But it is true that very few, a small percentage finish that start. But again, we're in the infancy on this kind of thing. And you see here, if you've got 50,000 students that sign up and only 10% finish, well, that's still 5,000 students. So, you know, there's a lot there. So take a look at this. You're seeing some of the pushback, some of the analysis of it. There was another article recently in Time US that talked about, you know, whether MOOCs are really working or not. And again, you know, we're just starting out with this, and I wouldn't, the old throw the baby out with the bathwater thing, that we don't want to necessarily just give up on MOOCs just because we're starting to deal with some of the growing pains and some of the concerns. And again, I think that libraries and librarians can really help to make these things work and work better. And then the last thing, just the other day, just yesterday on Slate, they talk about MOOCs as well, and that first of all, it gives you an awareness of all the history and things like that. But we really, what I thought was really telling in this article was this comment here, that we really don't know still that much about learning. So whether MOOCs are successful or for everyone and those kinds of things, we need to kind of figure that all out. And I think it's very encouraging that libraries and librarians are getting involved and wrestling with this. So I'm going to put this aside, come back to the presentation, and this is my summary of what that backlash, the implications of the backlash, or the implications of online learning in general for us as libraries and librarians, meaning that it doesn't matter whether there's a backlash, whether it's MOOCs or something else. It really doesn't matter whether a specific technology is working or a specific approach to online learning, because this is inevitable. This is happening. We are in an online world. The students that I have, and I teach undergrads, I teach freshmen, sophomores, their view of how they interact with people and learn and experience life is as much online and virtual as it is physical. And therefore, for us, we need to know about these things, and not just know, but to really embrace them, because the way things have been done up until now, those days are over. And I think the next 20 years are going to be the most unsettling times in education, perhaps in all history. So let me talk then what I think some of the implications and the assertions that relate to that are. And then I'll pause after these to see if there are any questions. And after we answer some of those questions, then I'll move on finally to the role of libraries and librarians. So Eisenberg's assertions. Number one, again, like I just said, online learning is not the future, it's the present. That's where we are. We are involved with online learning. This was last spring. I picked up this article, last winter, January, that in New York, the chancellor is talking about the largest online degree program at their universities. And that's happening everywhere. And we certainly see that here in the West with the Western Governors Movement and all of the online things that are going on here. Baseline assertion number two. Online learning is not a substitute for face-to-face learning. And it's certainly not a poor substitute for face-to-face learning. I can honestly say that in my online learning experiences, most of them are as good, if not better, than face-to-face learning. And again, I've been doing this for 25 years or so, back to the early 90s, and actually late 80s, early 90s, and I've done many different formats. And what I can say is, when I teach the same course in face-to-face mode and online mode, there are some things that the online students learn through interaction and self-pace and in-depth opportunities to get into the material that is even better than face-to-face. Because let's think about face-to-face learning. You know, is it really all that different than it was at the turn of the century, or and I don't mean the 20th century, I mean the 19th century to the 20th, not to, to the 21st century. That online learning, the face-to-face learning is you walk around this campus and you go into the classrooms and you're just as likely to see students like this. So let's be a little more realistic about what face-to-face learning is all about, and is that the best way for students to learn, in fact? All right. Online learning is as varied, if not more varied, than face-to-face in our approaches, our strategies, and tactics. And that's really some of the excitement. It's not that MOOCs are going to take over the world, but the MOOC-type format of world-class experts delivering content that then we can use for more localized learning situations. Those are the kind of things that is really exciting. That as we expand our portfolio of online learning techniques and approaches and strategies, that we will be able to expand the not just the opportunities for students to learn, but their actual learning and achievement. Right? I mean, think about all the things that are coming. The tablets in K-12 education, the different formats. Look at this. My mom is 89, and she says she doesn't do anything, or she's not very good online. Well, she Skypes and interacts and does everything. People are learning, and there are tremendous opportunities in the online environment. This is a tough one for educational institutions to accept, that online learning takes more time to plan and deliver than traditional face-to-face. And so what does that mean for faculty load, for the time and effort of support staff, of librarians and IT staff involved? And we really need to think about it and plan it that way. And maybe we're wrestling that with that right here at the Information School. Do we, a typical faculty load of 4 courses, let's say, do we change that? Do we do it by the number of students? Do we do that by a combination of credits and other things? So all that has to be really, really thought out. Number 5, online learning requires extensive support, services, and resources. This is a great visual, by the way. If you get a chance, go to the NASA site and see this. This is everybody waving simultaneously. NASA did this thing in August, and it's live and interactive. But what I put it here for is as a metaphor for the pervasiveness of potential resources and services and support, the need and the delivery globally. And I hope that you as librarians are thinking about, okay, what do we want to be involved with? How can we meet needs through this, through not just providing resources, not just providing materials, but in providing services as well as interactive support. So we're really interested in those things. Assertion number 6, online learning is more in tune with our world today of work and play. Everybody's getting involved with the virtual, with the augmented, with the mobile, with the social. By augmented, we mean that's where you're adding technology on. Google Glass is an example of that. And this is kind of where the world's going. Again, face-to-face is hugely important. Face-to-face is not going to disappear, but online is increasingly relevant as well. And the last thing is that online learning offers us, librarians, a chance to become even more essential and directly engaged in learning and teaching than ever before. And that's what I mean, that we're on the precipice of a golden age for libraries and learning. So let me pause here before I, let me do the next 2 slides, then I'll pause, right? And the reason that librarians have this opportunity, as well as the nature of the opportunity is this, and that is that we are moving from a scarcity of resources, and where the main task of libraries and librarians is to help people to find that needle in the haystack. That's not the problem so much anymore. Finding information, search, resources, that's not where the action is. It's more that we have a stack full of needles of all valuable, relevant, credible, useful information and resources and tools, and how do we put them to work? And that's what librarians can help with now. They can help us to put all these needles, these valuable things that we found, to work. So I'm going to talk about implications for libraries and librarians, but first let me pause and see if there are any questions.
Well, Mike, I do have a question, and that has to do with your sixth assertion about being in tune with the world, or sorry, your fifth one about global support. In the library world, or in academia perhaps, our resources are shrinking in terms of our, in terms of our budgets, and yet we're talking about MOOCs that are going to have a global audience. So how are we going to support this global community of attendees, of registrants, with the shrinking number of staff positions and shrinking resources?
Okay, big question, right? Part of my answer is I think that it's a chicken and egg kind of thing, and that if we show and get involved and demonstrate how vital what we're doing is to the actual learning that's taking place in our institutions, I'm not sure the shrinking is going to continue. But I also think with the shrinking, it's a matter of really understanding our collections, our facilities, our resources, our staff and things, and being really willing to rethink it almost completely. In terms of collections, I mean, do we really need to replicate book collections from academic library to academic library, or school library to school library? We have, I think, more quality information at our fingertips through our libraries today than ever before in history. So while you say it's shrinking maybe in terms of our budgets and things like that, it's shrinking at the same time there's more available. So I think we need to be a lot more strategic in looking at our collections. What is a collection? And how do we make things available? And it may very well be that we need to think about totally new funding models. Why is it that we have to get access to online databases and resources through each library and have to do all that authentication and all those things? Aren't there some baseline online resources that every citizen in the state of Washington should have access to, or every citizen of the United States? Maybe Congress should be responsible for the baseline of e-resources for the country. And I know people are laughing and say, oh, that's never going to happen. They can't even agree about, Obamacare or whatever it is. But I really want to put these things in front of them. And maybe with the MOOC environment, maybe there's a small charge per MOOC that actually goes to the infrastructure support and services. So I really think that, and I'm going to get a little more to this in my final set of comments, that we just have to be ready to rethink a lot of things. I've done a considerable work with smaller four-year colleges and universities, and I'm very encouraged with the way they're rethinking their facilities. They're creating learning commons and things, moving books either to the less used areas or actually even putting them off-site and things like that, focusing on the 80-20 rule. What are the 20% of things that people really need at their fingertips? I just think there's a lot that we can do if we stop saying, well, this is the way we've always done things, therefore we have to continue, and that a library is only as good as its collection. Well, I'm not so sure that's true anymore, because I can run a school library, and that's my background. I could run a very, very effective school library today without my own collection. I could do it. And because I'd be very involved with pedagogy and using online and all kinds of other things. So
okay.
maybe we can revisit a little of that. Okay?
I think yes. Let me pose the other questions that have come in.
Okay.
First of all, somebody is asking if you could give a few examples of the needles that were mentioned in your slide, or that you showed as an image in your slide.
Yeah. Well, the needles are, first of all, the online databases. Right? We know they're credible. I know you're going to push back, and I'll wait for questions, but I would say one of the really valuable, credible sources today is called Wikipedia. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's widely available, and it's absolutely amazing that it is available. I think the free online services, things like you can use some of the polling software and I use Poll Everywhere, and it's free if you've got under, say, 40 attendees or something like that. I think that's a high quality. I think that the learning management systems are needles. What I mean is that we've got some really valuable resources, services, tools available to us today, and we can put those together where for the individual student, the challenge is not digging out that really hard to find resource anymore, because they've got so many resources, it's really choosing from among those. And what that means to me is that the library and librarians' focus needs to be less on search and more on use.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We have a couple of others that we'd like to take now, and then we'll continue with your program. But let me ask you the next one.
Okay.
What do you see as the implications of MOOCs at the global international level? And perhaps you addressed that when I asked my question a minute ago.
Do they mean that you mean in terms of helping to delivering learning and educational programs worldwide?
I don't know, because perhaps the person who asked this question could elaborate a little bit, and we can come back to that one when you're finished.
Well, yeah, but let me just say that I do think what's really exciting is that national boundaries are, in a learning context, almost irrelevant. And we can deliver these things across the globe, but there are individual challenges because of the information infrastructure in some of these other places, that they don't have access necessarily to the kinds of libraries and resources that we're talking about. So we need to find ways to do that, which is an opportunity.
All right, two more, and then we'll go on. What are some concrete examples of how libraries can help with MOOCs? Okay.
One clear example of how libraries can help with MOOCs would be to work with students on ways of ensuring that they have access. So to set up, say, a series of guidelines for making sure that students at your own institution who are engaged with the MOOCs fully understand how they can get to the specific resources that they need in order to do that MOOC. I'm not talking about a particular article that a faculty member is going to use necessarily, but the range of resources around the MOOCs to understand what is the information base for that MOOC. Now, the other thing that I did just mention, those resources, working with faculty to help to identify online resources that can be used within the MOOCs, within the pedagogy and the instruction. There's a tremendous role for that. The one criticism for my online course that I taught last winter in January of 2013 was some of my readings were out of date, according to them. I have to admit, they're right. I didn't have a chance to spend to update some of my readings and things. So I would love to, and I should have gone over or emailed to our contact in the library to help me out. I see that as a major role as well. And the last thing I'll say, and it's going to come to the implications as well, is that students need help and assistance and guidance, not in resources that they might use so much as understanding the parameters of their assignments and the overall structure of learning. In other words, we can help interpret assignments, to talk about what it's going to require to complete those assignments. There's a whole direct relationship with students that's quite different than what we are used to doing in libraries.
So there's one comment here, and then we'll continue, and this is that this person says that she sees a huge emphasis on open access resources such as LibGuides, FAQs for MOOCs, and that kind of thing. And that actually might be part of your answer to the previous question.
Absolutely. But the key, I think, will be for us to collaborate on these so that each of us is not reinventing the wheel. Right? That if we create these guides and these kinds of support things, so maybe for a given MOOC there needs to be a cross-institutional library team that is charged with helping to do just what you were talking about, create those kinds of resources.
So I think what we should do now, Mike, is for you to go into your implications section, and then we'll finish up with any questions once you're at the end of your presentation.
Okay, and I'll try to move through these somewhat quickly so that we still have.
We have about 9 minutes left.
Yeah,
we can go over by if we need to.
Okay, so implications for libraries. So the first, this reflects my thinking and my reflecting for this webinar and this presentation. I think that that libraries and librarians will see expanding needs, and so our expanding needs in terms of the faculty and what their expanding needs are. The faculty have a need for pedagogical expertise, assistance. They need to understand everything, the intimate things about MOOCs and other online systems and how they can do that, and they will need targeted resources. And maybe some are open source and open web, but even ones that we do want to delve into databases and other systems that we purchase. Faculty will need all kinds of help with the technologies and the tools of online learning, and it's going to continually change and update. And so I think there's a really important role for libraries and librarians to get involved with that and not just leave it to the instructional support staff if you have that in your institutions. And then there's a need for instructional design and development and evaluation assistance, and faculty will have tremendous needs for that. Students, I like the term information consultation. I am a librarian. I am an information consultant to faculty, to students, to just about anybody. And what I'm talking about is consulting. Notice, I'm not necessarily talking about resources. Oh, I'll get to that down here, and I'll need that. But I'm talking about consulting with students about assignments. What is required for this assignment? How many resources? What types of resources? And those things. But also, what does it mean to get this done? What are the alternative formats? So we need to, I'll use Big Six for a minute. The first stage of the Big Six is task definition. Stage number 3 is location and access. It's search. So I think students need a lot more consultation on task definition than they do on search and location and access. They also will need information literacy learning. And information literacy learning, and I'm not necessarily saying that we have to teach information literacy, that we have to necessarily have formal instructional programs, although I'm not against those, but that we can maybe infuse information literacy learning into the systems, into the MOOCs, into the course management systems, into the various tools that we use, and thinking about ways that we can do that. And again, what students need to learn about are the requirements of assignments, credibility, and crediting and citing. And I just want to point out, I'm not talking about how to cite in terms of the mechanics in that. I mean, we get so hung up on that. I'm talking about students don't understand how to combine two resources or information from two resources together and how to cite them effectively. Again, not the technical aspects, but the how and why. And then all members need timely, high-quality, on-demand services, meaning, you know, in the virtual world, whether it's 24/7 or chat or whatever. And there's still a tremendous need, library as place, and we need, I think, to start setting up virtual places where people hang out and just interact and work just like your physical ones. And I have this idea of a virtual study rooms that we can talk about if there's time. And then we all need someone to be tracking the cutting edge and informing us. And again, what a wonderful role for libraries and librarians, right? So therefore, we need to be flexible, up to date, and engaged in our institution's thinking and planning. If I am a public librarian, and hopefully there are some public librarians out there, I need to think about what are the needs of my community, my constituents in terms of MOOCs. Are we going to sponsor MOOCs? Are we going to make them available? Are we going to highlight them? What is our role as a library institution within the larger institution of community organizations and services? In a K-12 library, what is my school planning on doing and thinking about offering to our students in terms of online learning, and certainly in higher ed? And so we need a clear sense of our institutional priorities. What is our mission and purpose? Is our mission and purpose to have a really, really good collection? Or is our mission and purpose to meet the information needs of people? And we need to engage in a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in relation to all this stuff? What are our preferred approaches to facilities, resources, and services? Meaning that question, again, under resources of collections. And then what are our priorities? And let me focus on that just a little more. Based on student, faculty, and institutional needs, what are our priorities? And here are some examples of priorities. That our priority is no longer to be focusing our teaching or our lessons on search. We're not moving to search. We're going to focus on other things, like instead of search, we're going to focus on assignments. We're going to work with faculty to revise their handouts and their assignments, and here particularly focusing on the resources they might use. Less emphasis on the print. Lead with the online. One of the things that kind of concerns me sometimes is librarians are the ones that say, but don't forget about print. Yeah, I know that. I understand that. I agree with you, all that. But don't lead with that. Because you lead with that and people say, oh, they're still stuck in the past. If you lead with the online and the digital and then talk about print as well, that's the way to go. Spaces and facilities. And again, I'm thinking about collaborative online spaces. And then this infusion of information literacy into everything that we do. You don't have to offer a course or a live session to help students learn information literacy things. So I think that's it. I think we have a few more minutes, and I would be glad to answer any further questions.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. We do have a few more questions, and maybe a couple more will come in the next minute or so. A comment that from one attendee that in the MOOC that she has taken, she was the only American that she saw participate in the discussion, wow. Which I guess speaks to your global community.
It does, but you see, helping people not just the logistics of how you participate and communicate, but the nature of it, and helping people that may not have taken MOOCs ever before to understand how one interacts in an online, what's the netiquette, what are the protocols. That's the kind of stuff that librarians can do too.
And here is another comment. I'm actually glad that you mentioned public libraries. I don't know if we have any public librarians among our audience, but the comment is that public libraries can get contacted when students in their area take a MOOC. Something like meetup.com could be helpful in this instance.
Terrific, wonderful, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one of the things we need to do is kind of survey our customers more, right? Survey our users, find out what they're doing. If we found out that I live in a community called Shoreline, that in Shoreline there were 30 people signed up for a particular MOOC, wow, then I might even do some really special things in the library around that in order to encourage it. So yes, it may be that we find that particular libraries we divide up the MOOCs, right? And that, let's say, the King County Library System is going to be working with and supporting these 20 MOOCs, and maybe the Cleveland Public Library is going to be supporting these others. Or I think it could be a renaissance for public libraries as learning centers.
And in another comment about public librarians, they could help locate quality MOOCs that match the needs of their community. This is sort of along the lines of what you just said, and promote them or support MOOC usage by providing learning labs with updated computers for full participation, guidance with supplemental materials, and so on.
I agree completely. Of course, you know what they're going to say off the bat. We don't even have the resources and the people to do what we currently do, and now you want us to do that. And my answer to that would be, maybe you better rethink what you're doing. What are the priorities? If this is where your user base is going, maybe that's more important than something else. And I don't know. The other thing I think we can do is we can look to a future where we expand. Right? All these problems, when we do strengths, weaknesses, the weaknesses, the threats, they're really all opportunities for us. And that's why it's so great to be a librarian today.
Here is I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So here's one that you haven't addressed yet, and actually one that I've been very concerned with, and that is, what about copyright and licensing?
Yes, I think there's two sides to this. One, again, under that information literacy kind of thing, infusing it into resources and systems, that's one thing we can do. We can help the students in the MOOCs and whatever to understand, not like we're cops and whatever, but it really should be more, this is how you use resources legally and appropriately. And the clearest example is graphics, right? And images. We're all using that. Look at all these graphics that I use, right? Mm-hmm. I hope you notice, like on this one, I have permission because of their license or whatever, and then I know it. But people don't know that, and what are the good sources for that? So that's the one thing. The other thing we can do, if we know that our patrons, our users, are in fact engaged in a MOOC and whatever, then we can work with them, just like academic libraries used to work with faculty on licensing things for reserve. I think it's a huge opportunity for us to expand in a new online and digital environment, and not just, if I'm a faculty member and I come to the library and I say, I really like to use this resource, and I don't, but it's copyrighted and I don't have permission. Yes, you can help me to use that one, but you may also offer me some alternatives that I may already have access to legally or things like that. So I think it's a wonderful role for us, again, to help people to do the right thing. The answer to misuse is to make appropriate use as easy and effortless as possible.
And just one other comment from a public librarian. That maybe we should use our own staff development folks to support these adult learners in the community, not just our own staff.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I think every librarian needs to think of themselves as an educator as well. A little plug for our school, the MLIS program at the University of Washington. I think we are the only library program where there is a required course in teaching and learning. And it's called Instructional Strategies for Information Professionals, and it is a required course for every library student. And I think we all need to become somewhat experts. I think it's a baseline skill is really becoming master teachers along with our information roles.
So, Mike, I think that brings us to about 5 minutes after the hour, and we probably should wrap up. I want to thank you very much for this wonderful, energetic, forward-looking comments that you made on the rapidly evolving online learning scene.
Well, thank you. It was an honor to be asked to do it and to participate and to kick it off and go out there and do great things. I understand we have to make tough choices as librarians, but the needs are huge. It's the information age. We are the original information professionals. I love being a librarian. I love being a library educator. And go out there and make me proud. Take care.
So we're just going to conclude now very quickly. Let me just reiterate, yes, the slides will be sent to the attendees together with the link to the recording. And you should probably get that in the next couple of hours or by tomorrow. You will also soon be sent a survey about today's session. And your answers are very important and help the ALCTS Continuing Education Committee, the group that sponsors this webinar and the others that you see on your screen, and the other continuing education opportunities that we offer, to plan future offerings that address your needs. So please do take a moment to respond to the questionnaire. So as we conclude today's session, thanks again, Mike, for the stimulating and detailed presentation and for so accurately setting the stage for the next 3 webinars in this series. Thanks as well to Iping Chen Gaffey for providing technical support, and we hope that you found today's webinar of interest, and we look forward to welcoming you on October the 9th when Stephen Bell will share his thoughts on MOOCs, libraries, and higher education.